Hello everyone, it's good to see you all back. Today we're diving into the Hunter Prismatic build with a setup that's as versatile as it is powerful. Using Prismatic, Gifted Conviction, Deterministic Chaos, and Ascension aspect, we can maintain a high-flying and highly dangerous build all catered around ad clearing and causing as much madness as possible. With the amount of bulk charge, jolt, and damage reduction be applied, you can pull off some crazy things that you wouldn't normally do in Endgame, but it's only on this channel you'll see this madness in full. A stormy exotic weapon, Deterministic Chaos, and its exotic effect, Vexidecimal and Heavy Metals, it states, are strong against barrier champions. While holding the trigger, every fourth heavy metal projectile also weakens targets on impact. While holding down the trigger, every fourth bullet becomes a heavy projectile that makes targets volatile on impact. Now while this might not be interacting much with our exotic armor, this will be helpful in terms of applying debuffs and being useful against the barrier champions. Against barriers, it can delete them in a matter of seconds, which I do find odd that many players just generally don't use machine gun at all. Secondly, adding things like volatile marksman, melee harvest, and void flux seasonal mods to this weapon allows it to reach its peak in terms of its overall damage being pumped out. The weapon already applies volatile and weakening effect, but having these extras added on can pave the way with dealing with larger enemies without the need of ever using your super. Alternatively, Bastion, exotic fusion rifle, is a good replacement if you want something that can trigger particle deconstruction mod and also get a damage bonus in the process, but only for those that generally just don't want to have a exotic machine gun in hand. Our second exotic is Gifted Conviction, with this exotic effect, the Gift of Certainty, which states, activating Ascension, or Tempest Strikes, throws bouncing explosives at nearby targets that jolt and damages them. A jolting nearby targets grants you damage resistance. The exotic can work in two ways in terms of either being used through melee or class ability. The class ability option allows you to greatly cover a much more wider area when dealing with enemies underneath you, which overall provides a greater effect on the exotic on hand. I have tested this out in GMs and Quarter Blades, and I've been successful with popping off with it and getting those crispy bonuses as it applies. However, pulling this build off does require some level of practice and sanity, especially if using GMs, as you can get instantly shredded if timed wrong, something I've been through many times. Yet when pulled off correctly, it becomes quite fun to use. For aspects and fragments, we have the following. A stylish executioner will defeat a target affected by elemental debuffs, grants invis and true sight. Ascension, well, while airborne, consume a class ability to summon an arc staff, propelling yourself upwards and creating a burst of energy around you that amplifies allies and jolt targets. A facet of purpose, where collecting all the power will grant you an elemental pickup based on the super you have. A facet of sacrifice, where while having an arc, solar, or void buff, ability flying blows grants additional darkness energy. A facet of balance, where rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Doing the same with darkness damage grants you grenade energy. A facet of protection, where while surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. And facet of hope, while having elemental buff, your class ability slowly regenerates. To complement Ascension's aspect usage, it would be wise to include a number of items to the build. A prime example of this is the facet of hope, protection and purpose on hand. Protection and purpose are both going to be supporting the increased damage reduction we'll have when hovering over enemies to activate our exotic. Along with gifted DR effect, we should be able to safely activate the exotic swiftly without being shredded in a matter of seconds. Hope will of course keep the class ability alive once we have personal buff available to do so, aka invisibility. You then have sacrifice and balance added to the build just so we can get our ability energy back up faster and also get darkness transcendent energy back as well. If you have not noticed, my build only has two ways of building up darkness transcendence energy, which we really need to have on hand if we wish to use Ascension on a more wider scale. I can add faster grace to the build if I tend to use a kinetic primary instead, which can help bolster my transcendent state even faster than normal. If you can get a weapon that is both kinetic and also grants you strategies for a class ability region, then that should set you up for life. Now, while seasonal mods won't play a huge part in the build, I do believe having them will play a big part in the areas when needed most. Having dielectric, a flashover, and defibrillating blast are recommended as we do have ways to trigger their effects. A flashover, for example, needs targets to be severed, which our threaded strike can activate and then the arc weapons can finish. Dielectric would trigger on jolt effect being activated via exotic and arc aspect. A DB will of course be triggered fairly easily from stunning champions, so it requires little effort to trigger. These are the only seasonal mods outside of the Elements of Cypher mod that will benefit the build in its entirety. as truthfully, even without these mods included, the build does fairly well even without them. For the mod and stats, we have both resilience and discipline mod as priorities like always, while mobility will be enhanced through transcendent state and additional mods. Resilience, we have ours at a tier 10 for a 30% damage reduction. Outside of our transcendent state and elemental resistance mod selected, we do also have frost armor and gifted conviction and exotic armor effect that will grant us damage reduction. Gifted, for example, can give us a 25 to 50% damage reduction when activated, which in many ways will allow us to play more risky when activating the Ascension perk. Ideally, if you can maintain the Ascension aspect via class ability mods, then this can be very handy in a wide number of content. A discipline, we have ours at tier 10 for a 53-second cooldown via arc grenades. A fast dominance won't be added here for further buffs and applications that we would normally do. Instead, the grenade will be used for ad control, and that's really it. Depending on what you prefer, you could go with the other choices instead if you want a grenade that covers multiple areas instead of just the one. If you intend to use your grenades more, you could add in the Ashes to Assets mod for faster super energy regen. Alternatively, if you don't intend to use your grenade too much, invest into your class ability instead, as tier 6 to 7 grenades is fine either way. Now, expanding on the key ability we'll be using, I do recommend the following: Impact Induction for a 12% grenade regen, Bolster and Detonation for a 12% class ability regen, Momentum Transfer for a 12% melee recharge, Recuperation if you need a quick way to heal, and Distribution for a 4% all ability cooldown, and Outreach for a 12% melee regen as well. Additional mods, we then have the following: Harmonic Siphon for creating orbs of power with magic elemental types, a Dynamo where your super cooldown is reduced when using class ability near enemies, Heavy Finder, Reserves and Scavenging mods for heavy weapons, Charged Up ×1 for a +1 armor stacks we carry, Arc Holster where storing your weapon over time will gradually reload it, and Powerful Attraction where using class ability will automatically collect pickup items in your areas. So as we have covered our exotic heavy weapon, I'll then advise you to pick a super weapons for the build. These are all optional, like always. Primary, we have the Patron on Lost Causes, with Strategies and Kinetic Tremors. A very good primary to have on hand if you intend to use your secondary more than your primary in game. Having Strategies is such a big help for quickly getting our class ability back up quickly and running in a matter of a few kills. Although we do have Passive Hope to help bolster the area further, having 2 ways to get your class ability back up quickly is a must-have if you intend to use your class ability constantly in the build. At the same time, the weapon with KT is pretty decent and viable for all sorts of enemies you face, so overall it's a decent weapon to carry around with you. A secondary, we have the Psychopomp with Ambitious Assassin and Rolling Storm. The following will be aiding us with ad control, but mainly for building up bolt charges faster. Now we do have Dielectric, Flashover and Defibrillating Blast to help bolster our bolt charge effect, since this will be active once our abilities are full and ready to be used. Ideally, I want to make sure I can constantly trigger this effect more often when in my transcendent state, as Gifted Conviction is already applying damage to enemies caught by it, so why not double down and give it some more extra damage while we're here. However, if bolt charges aren't your thing, then the Rios Velocity Baton Grenade Launcher is another good weapon to have, especially if you have Volatile Marksman active for it. So I will admit, I was kind of hesitant on using Gifted Conviction in any sort of endgame content, since it requires players to be within range of enemies to fully trigger it. Something like this for GMs can straight up be a death sentence if not activated in a sensible manner at times. However, after playing around with it, and understanding where its true strength lies, the exotic and build played out pretty well for me. Being able to pull this off in a group of enemies is not only satisfying, but also worthwhile since you can jolt, get damage reduction, get false armor, apply bolt charge, and also go invisible. Such a setup is straight up powerful for most Sailor content, but seems to excel the most when using activities to where there are many minor enemies to face, such as Court or Blade activities, and GMs. With how the build is set up for most players, this should be fairly easy to jump on and use even if you're a new player. At the same time, your super can be swapped out if you feel like running status super isn't your thing. And lastly, being able to pull this off and then use your Prismatic along with the build has a nice follow-up flow to it, once you have activated Ascension aspect and play it off from there. Outside of the vulnerability of being killed mid-air, the build is risky, but also rewarding for those who wish to give these sort of builds a try. I don't have many ways to reduce incoming damage except for my Fragments and Exotic in hand, which might be something you may want to invest further into, since mods like Shreds can give you overmail when triggered. I would also recommend you add this strategic perk to your arsenal, as Fast of Hope is okay to have, but it's generally not enough to trigger the effect more often. The build for me was fun, and different to what I'm usually used to. It's very effective when pulled off, and can almost make you feel invincible when done correctly. So take it from me, the build is worth trying in endgame as it can do so much in little time, and all you gotta do is play risky. So there we have it. I hope you all enjoyed the build breakdown. If you have any thoughts on the content shared, then please leave a comment below, while if you enjoy the content and want more of these videos, then leave a like and a sub while you're here. A dim link for the build is located below in the pin section, and I do advise you check out my playlist for more. It was great sharing today's video with you all, and I hope to see you again soon.